Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everything in Poderation, because sometimes the internet can be too much. I am Robert, and I'm Oscar Mike.
Oh, I see what you did. I'm Daly, and I'm Quentin Tarantino. I don't know.
Hi, I'm Colin Sparling, and I'm I don't know. I'm sad. This just makes me sad and upset. I don't really know what else to say about it.
Yeah, forewarning for our listeners this week. This is going to be a slightly darker episode, considering we have to talk about literal, actual war crimes. Well, quote unquote, not actual war crimes, because they aren't technically designated war crimes, but like everything but, right?
War. What is it good for?
Absolutely nothing.
Thank you. That's been the podcast, guys. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Done. Did the job.
So I guess warning for you if any of that makes you a little squeamish. You've been warned off the top. So you may have seen the news recently, if you're in the gaming space, that this video game called 6 Days in Fallujah has been revived, which it was initially supposed to come out it was announced in 2009, and then people didn't like it because the idea of the game was based on a real life actual battle, the Second Battle of Fallujah, that happened in 2004. And after some backlash on the internet and in public opinion, Konami, the publisher at the time, pulled the plug and said, actually, maybe making a video game about a real war where real people died and a war that arguably shouldn't have happened, probably not a good idea.
Maybe not.
Fast forward to 2021. It's back.
Yeah.
It's back.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, it's also worth noting too that when you're hearing this is still kind of an ongoing story. It seems like there's still stuff coming out about the game, about the developers, about people reacting to the game. It was one of those things where I heard it announced, and then that was like, okay, I mean, that I guess sounds kind of interesting, and then didn't really think much more about it. And then all these articles started coming out, and then people started reacting to it, and then I was like, oh no.
Yeah, it was definitely in the second wave of controversy. The first time around, it was like, hey, this is like too soon, and people who like families were actually involved with this were like, hey, can you not? Whereas this time around, although this whole thing is obviously still in living memory, I feel like it's more just one man's mission to dig a very deep hole from himself with some problematic quotes.
Yeah, that's where I want to focus this on, right? It's not that the game's existence, I mean, the game's existence is controversial, but that's not the sticking point here. I think it's more that his the lead publisher here, well, the founder of the publishing house, Peter Tamty, I think Tamty, he did a lot of interviews. He did a little circuit around some games media, but the first one to come out was one with Polygon, where he was interviewed by Charlie Hall, and this was published on February 15, where the headline is 6 Days in Fallujah, quote, not trying to make a political commentary, creator says. Let's unpack that, guys. Can we just unpack that a little bit?
Well, I mean, where he's coming from is, it's not about, and this is a quote, it's not about the politics of whether or not the U.S. should have been there. And then he goes on to say later, that kind of stuff is for politicians to worry about.
But it's not.
Politics are for politicians.
No,
it's in the name, Robert. It's in the name.
Why do we vote?
So that we don't have to be involved in politics. But wait, isn't voting inherently political? Is war inherently political?
Oh, man, that's some dangerous territory. War inherently political?
Oh, boy.
What?
You telling me that all the wars fought in the past thousands of years weren't just for sport?
Nah, I think that you're thinking of the Olympics, dude.
Oh.
Those are just for sport.
Wow. Yeah, this is I don't even know where to begin about this, because this is such a this is so messy. So I want to back up and say that it almost feels weird calling something like this a game. And so he what I've noticed is he's trying to echo the sentiment of like, it's not political, it's all about the on the ground experience of the people that were there, right? And I was like, okay, sure, I'll humor you for a second. What's this experience that we're going to be having in this game? And you're going to be playing as American soldiers, getting their side of the story and only their side of the story. And in your trailer, there's no Iraqis talking about their side of things with this whole situation, right? So what are we experiencing here? Because from what it sounds like right now, it's very one-sided. It's very whitewashed, almost propaganda. This almost sounds like an American Sniper situation.
Yeah.
Oh, what a movie.
Such a great
Remember
movie,
that.
fantastic. You know?
Yeah.
What I kind of would like to do as a good thought exercise, and I think is a good way for us to open up a discussion about this, is I'm sure by now, if you're familiar with this topic, you've seen a number of headlines that mostly boil down to maybe this sucks or maybe this isn't a good idea. And I think, you know, and if you aren't familiar with it, maybe that's the first thing you jump to, right? So what might be interesting is for us to maybe try to give like the biggest benefit of the doubt here and try to analyze this game based on the interviews so far. I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but try to analyze it as divorced from politics as possible.
Wow.
Yeah.
And just think about, what is this as a video game, right?
Yeah.
Because based on what a lot of Tomty's been saying is that he wants to tell a story about soldiers who are in a tough situation, and he wants to create a game where players, not just like movie actors on the big screen, make a decision. No, it's like you, the player, have to make some tough wartime decisions, and he wants to capture that in a video game to showcase that to an audience that's never experienced it before.
Yeah. Well, before we put the carriage in front of the horse, we should probably give context to why like this whole controversy is there and like what the Battle of Fallujah is, because there might be people listening that are a little, I didn't know much about it going into this.
Actually, that's why I want to put the carriage in front of the thing you said, because I think a lot of people have been talking about why this is bad from the first place. So I think it might be interesting to explore it more as, why is it good? Because like clearly it has enough support. Like making a game isn't easy. It has enough support from people who think this would be a good idea. So I'd like to at least explore how much can we understand how good of an idea this could be, and then flip over to be like, and here's why it's really, really bad.
Yeah. So here's me being super generous with Mr. We decide Tomty, our boy Tomty. Let's be very generous with him. So he, throughout his interviews, has been really stressing that, you know, it is supposed to be more of like the tactical side of things. It's more of like figuring out what to do in these very unprecedented situations in a, you know, for lack of a better word, a war game. And the reason why I think he's so stuck on this being during the Second Battle of Fallujah versus just like, let's make up, you know, some kind of fictional conflict for it, is because the Second Battle of Fallujah was the bloodiest for Americans in the Iraq War, period. Huge amount of casualties on both sides, and civilians for that matter. And it was one of the biggest urban battles. So the Fallujah is actually a city, and that hadn't been seen since Vietnam. So we got something totally huge happening in terms of like the impact of the Iraq War itself, which I guess let's ignore the political side of that. So I see where he's coming from as far as like, we have these like firsthand accounts of things that happened with interviews that we've done with Marines, and we have the technology to be able to put people in their boots. So I guess he really wants to do that.
Mm-hmm. And I also want to bring up too, it's not just Marines, according to Tom D. That part of the swath of people that were interviewed for this game include Iraqi civilians, some of which had to use weapons to survive in that situation. So again, biggest benefit of the doubt, this could be a cool exploration into one of modern history's darkest moments, right? About trying to figure out those hard decisions we have to make in these extraordinary circumstances. And that could be neat. The game will supposedly or make you play as an Iraqi civilian in some points too. That all could be good. And then in the GamesIndustry.biz interview, we'll probably put these links below if you want to read these yourself, but he was asked about, okay, so if you can play as an Iraqi civilian and you want to explore like the tough decisions that are made, why not make a game like Bury Me My Love, this phone game, where it's about someone in a wartime situation, but they have to make these hard decisions, and none of the decisions are combat based. They're like, you know, what to do with your loved ones kind of stuff, right? So why not make a game like that? And Tom T's response was, actually, let me pull up the quote because it's a fucking trip. Very few people. Oh, go ahead.
This man digs a very deep hole for himself every time he opens his mouth.
Very few people are curious what it's like to be an Iraqi civilian. Nobody's going to play that game, but people are curious what it's like to be in combat. It's the same reason people play survival horror games, being in a situation that is beyond what we have in our normal lives.
Because we don't have enough Call of Duty games to simulate combat in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess to a degree understand like where he's like where he comes from with his reasoning. But at the same time, like all the reasoning he's giving can be countered with like, okay, but why does this need to be set in this actual battle with these real people with all these things going on? Because if you're just trying to make a game, right, out of this, instead of an interactive experience that is just recounting like the absolute atrocity that this whole situation was, then like you could easily have avoided this whole controversy without like painstakingly trying to go out of your way to set it in at this point. You know what I'm saying? Like you could have just used all of the same resources. You could have talked to all the people you still talk to, but you could have just set it in a semi-fictional situation or like a historical fictional sort of setting. And a lot of this could have been avoided. So I don't know. It's really hard for me to find like other than marketing, other than making headlines, like why you would do this. Because honestly, this game is probably going to sell.
Oh yeah. I can see it.
This game is probably going to
selling.
Sell. Can't speak to how good it'll actually be in terms of like being a game.
Like, will it be even fun to play? Like, if you can turn off everything else, will it be fun? Right? Who knows?
But like, is that okay?
Yeah. Is it okay for it to be
for
fun?
A game like this to be fun?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because I think this just gets into like, okay, but why do this when Spec-Ops The Line exists and pretty much does what you're going for, that you're claiming to go for anyway?
I feel like if I channel Tomty here with some dark magic, he might say something about, because there was a couple different interviews in which he indicated that while there has been pushback from the families of veterans who, you know, have suffered because of the Battle of Fallujah or died in Fallujah, he's also talked to people that were there, and family members of people that were there, and he's like, he wants to memorialize them. It seems like, you know, he even said like, I wish I had written it down, but it was something along the lines of, you know, people say like, I don't, you know, above all, I don't want my son's sacrifice to be forgotten. And I think maybe in his head, like, this is one way to do that, to have people never be forgotten, because there are like going to be like genuine like NPCs are going to have the names and faces of people that were actually there.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is a good time to maybe start shifting toward the whole what makes this such a bad idea, right? Because I can really empathize with that idea of wanting to memorialize the soldiers who have fallen, right? Like, trust me, I grew up around the US military for 18 years of my life. I don't think it was successful on me, but it was definitely the attempt to indoctrinate me to love our heroes, to unwittingly and unthinkingly support our veterans and troops without questioning anything, is definitely something that goes around a lot in like military families and, you know, communities.
No way.
And yeah, and you know, in some cases I do respect that, because in many ways we're sending normal ass people into extraordinary situations where they have to worry about stuff like, I'm going to go to sleep tonight and I could wake up with my throat slit. That's not a cool thing to have to worry about day in, day out, right?
No.
So I can empathize with people that are out there in the field. But this is a war built on a lie. That's the one thing I can't get over, is that, you know, they didn't have to be in Iraq. It's sad that they were in Iraq, and it's sad when a US soldier dies in Iraq. That, like, full stop. It's sad when anyone dies, right? For the most part. But when you think about the overall context of why that event happened, it's really hard to divorce any sense of politics from it. And that becomes your focal point. Not that I want to honor fallen soldiers, but the I want to take politics out of this video game based on a real war that shouldn't have happened. That becomes the focus. That's where things get very controversial. And that's where you're going to run into a lot of people disagreeing with the concept of your video game.
Yeah, it really just boils down to, like, you don't take something like this that's based in a war that, especially now, most Americans like disagree that we're even fucking there. Like, we shouldn't have been in Iraq to begin with. Like, it was a reactionary war because of 9/11, and so Bush thought we should go there and fight.
WMDs, y'all.
Yeah. And we looked for weapons of mass destruction, didn't find them. And now we're basically there because Middle East gives us lots of oil. Woohoo!
Interesting correlation there, Colin.
Who would have thought? It's almost like we like oil or something.
It is one of those, like, you can't ask someone, like, why are we in the Middle East, without getting either several different answers or a big old shrug.
Yeah. And so my point is, you're going to set this game in the bloodiest battle of a war that shouldn't be happening. And so your narrative should be, this isn't a game. This is an interactive experience where the narrative is like, hey, war is fucking terrible. And look at this terrible shit that people did. Maybe, and it's not necessarily because they wanted to. I don't think that the officers, you know, the soldiers that were there, anyone wanted to kill civilians. You know what I'm saying? Like, they did, that's not something they were chomping at the bit to do. They were looking for people that were the enemy, that were causing harm to other people, and other people got caught in the crossfire. There's a lot of explosives being used. White phosphorus is a thing. And yeah, so.
Well, for context for that too, using white phosphorus on civilians is literally a war crime in the Geneva Convention. Fun fact.
Yeah. So they essentially, these soldiers were pawns from politicians. The fact that they were there, because these are essentially just normal people that wanted to go into the military. And yeah, you know, there is the person that's like, yeah, I want to see some action and blah, blah, blah. But these are young people that go into the military for A, B, and C reasons. You know, maybe that's to get college pay. Maybe they do want to fight, but everyone has their reasons. Mm-hmm. And so people are there and all these atrocities are committed. And basically the theme of this game should be, war is terrible. Look what it can do. Because a lot of those fucking people that were there probably have PTSD now, probably have mental health issues, probably are on medication because of it, probably are suicidal on many occasions. And no one wins. You know what I'm saying? And that's what should be communicated through this game.
Yeah, a veteran, John Phipps, you might have seen him on Twitter a lot, but he did an interview with thegamer.com, and like even he's explained like I still get some cold sweat, like I still worry about some of the things or think about some of the things that I did because he was there, like he was literally actually there in the time when the video game is trying to depict, but like in real life, in the real world, and he very much disagrees with the way this game is being executed because it's like to him war is a monstrous thing, like it's almost impossible to capture it in any form of media for the average layperson to really understand it. So yeah, I mean that's just kind of backing up your point, right? About
but boy
PTSD.
Does the industry try, because there's so many games set in combat, which is something that I just have trouble wrapping my head around to begin with. That it's like this is what we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna play some Call of Duty, and a lot of the times I think that there's a lot of hand waving that can work to the games industry benefit as far as being like, this is fictionalized, like there's zombies, of course it's going to be, it's not based on anything real. But then we have these moments where the line between this kind of fantasy that we've collectively written as a society about war and what it's like versus the actual hard facts. And yeah, there's going to be some controversy around it because of that.
I mean, even Modern Warfare isn't divorced from it entirely. I mean, do you guys remember when Modern Warfare 2019 came out? There was that controversy with the Highway of Death.
Yep.
Yeah, where because the real Highway of Death was a real like thing that happened during the Gulf War in the 90s, where, fun fact, America also brushed up against some war crimes there and murdered hundreds of people, so many people. Some soldiers like grossly described it as like a shooting gallery, I think, where they just massacred an entire highway. And then in Modern Warfare, the video game, they had a mission called Highway of Death. But that isn't at all about the real life Highway of Death. But then they pinned a similar situation on the Russians.
It's always easy to do, isn't it? In these games, the Russians did something. I don't know
who did this evil thing. The Russians probably.
Probably Russians.
Yeah, so
not us.
And that's obviously all fictional. But when you even call back to something that does exist in real life, it brings up a lot of politics. Fun fact.
Yeah, I mean, that's trying to be revisionist history.
Yeah, it's almost like saying that you're, divorcing, you're taking the politics out of the context is an inherently political move? ?
Yeah. I mean, that brings me to what makes me so angry about 6 Days in Fallujah is that, I mean, I've said this time and time again, being apolitical is a political stance, right? And it's arguably one of the most harmful, in my opinion, at least when it comes to like media, right? Because I would honestly be okay if Tomty was like bold-faced, like, hooah, yeah, Marines are really fucking cool. Yeah, this game is political because you know what? We should have been in the Middle East because we beat the terrorists and we liberated the Middle East from the evil Taliban, right? And he was just like extremely, right-wing, pro-war. Like, I'd be more okay. I would disagree with it completely, but I'd be more okay with that being upfront, as opposed to this weird, like, we're going to talk about war, but it's not going to be political, because being political can be divisive, and that's bad. So I'm going to be like, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I'm better than both. I'm not political. That's some bullshit, dude. Like,
that's
this game is going to have,
statement. Like, dude.
Yeah. Like, this game is going to have some political messaging, but when you try to frame it as non-political, it doesn't do anyone a service.
No, it doesn't.
You can't have your cake and eat it too, dude. That's life. You have to acknowledge these things. I have a quote from him where it's like, when they were like, hey, what about, war crimes, like the white phosphorus shake and bake, explosions, etc. And he was like, well, that distracts people from the human stories that we can identify with.
or maybe it's part of the human stories.
It's maybe I in my notes I wrote down who's human here. Tanti, who's the humans here?
Let me say something. You know what else is part of the human fucking story? Dying.
Yeah.
We ignore
by
that,
fire.
though.
Yeah.
Like white phosphorus is pretty fucked up. Like look it up if you're brave enough. It's really not pretty what it can do when it touches a human being.
Yo, you can see that firsthand if you watch if anyone's watched the movie Annihilation with the lovely Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaacs. Spoilers toward the end of the film. White phosphorus
was the real bad guy this whole time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes? Actually, wait, yes?
Yes? I haven't seen the movie. I don't know.
This game, to me, if it were to come out, it should be... To me, it should be like a lot of the ways that... And I'm not... This isn't a one-to-one comparison, but I'm talking about the way it made me feel, not the content. But when I was playing through The Last of Us Part 2, the big theme of that game, and I know it's a controversial game, but the big theme of that game is the endless cycle of violence, right?
A lot of violence.
And that game, like by the end of it, I was just like, oh my God. Like that game almost made me fucking depressed. Like it was like the atmosphere and just the endless fucking violence and just people dying and just like senseless violence. It was like, it was suffocating. And this game should be like that. But like even worse since it's real. That's what it should, like this should make people sick when they play it. You know what I'm saying? That's the type of message that it should leave you with.
Yeah. It should.
If I was to make a game like this.
And could. Yeah. But just like I said, every time this man opens his mouth, it seems like it's the opposite direction where it's like, I want, the gameplay to be like the standout thing. I want the idea of like the tactical, like moving through building to building dealio to be the highlight here. And you're then missing a huge opportunity to do honor to what actually happened. And also, like I said, digging yourself a huge hole that we have now buried you in. You are in the grave now, Tomty.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really rough to me because we might be making this same mistake, or maybe just it's something that feels so obvious to us, I guess. But just by making a commercial video game for this, do you two think it feels like a tacit, like, approval of, we were in, like, America was in Iraq for the right reasons?
Like, could you mean like making this game is like by people buying it, they're saying they approve the message?
I'm saying just by making this game, period, is that because like if he's making this game without choosing to tackle the question of whether we were in the war was a good or bad thing, isn't that in a way tacitly saying that they accept?
I'll straight up say, yeah, absolutely. Like with just being like, I'm going to ignore the question. Then usually when people are like, I don't want to answer that question, I don't want to, examine that. You've already made your decision. Yeah.
I mean, if you read between the lines of what he's talking about, I mean, it comes across as very like pro-URA, like American propaganda sort of like, yeah, we were totally in the right, we made the right call. And it just doesn't feel right at all. I mean, in this situation, especially. And as of like the past two and a half decades, we've been inundated with tons and tons of war games, and most of them, especially the ones that are released here, are pro American military. You know what I'm saying? They're very much siding with American troops and making light of a lot of horrific things that happened. Unless they're like stuff that's far back. You know what I'm saying? That's like World War II. World War II, I think, almost has this almost like this mythology around it, but you know what I'm talking about? Like, but that has come to pass. And I guess you could argue that, I mean, that has like a more clear cut bad guy, because the Nazis are a pretty, in hindsight, pretty easy to see like bad guy. You know what I'm saying?
Nazis bad?
I don't know if that's true, because I think our last president did say there are good people on both sides. So let's not demonize Nazis. Okay.
Yeah, let's not demonize it.
Hey,
let's not demonize the Nazis.
Demonize the Nazis. Not great.
Yeah, but I don't know. But then you have fucking games that are set in like the Vietnam War, and like a lot of the narrative is like, yeah, you go here and you shoot some people in Vietnam, hoorah. And it's like, well, if you remember right, that was about 50, 60 years ago, and a lot of people said that we shouldn't have been there either.
Interesting. For
a lot of reasons. And a lot of people don't like that they were there who were troops, you know, like they're like, we shouldn't have fucking been there. But
yeah, and I mean, I do want to say it with a caveat, like I've never been the biggest fan of the idea of like, if you don't make a decision, that means you support something bad, you know, because I think that can be taken to an extreme level. Like it could be as dumb as like, oh, if you don't have an opinion about rap music, clearly you don't like rap. It's like, no, I mean, maybe you just don't really have an opinion about rap music, right?
Yeah,
and that's fine. I think with something like this, though, with something that feels so morally gray, it feels like it behooves you, where if you're going to work on something that is so ingrained in this battle, right? Like, it's literally the battle in video game form. I feel like I am not as lenient about the idea of, we're not trying to have an opinion about whether this was right or wrong. We're just going to kind of move past that and ignore it, because it's not our responsibility to litigate whether or not this was a war crime. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess you're game devs. Like, I'm not going to look to you to determine what is politically correct or incorrect. But when the people who are professionals, who understand whether these things were war crimes or not, are leaning toward the fact that it was a war crime, but aren't like outright saying it, because America has a lot of soft and hard power and there's a lot of politics going on there, maybe don't jump into the pool.
Yeah. Because in that sense, he's educated enough about the situation. He has the information to make a decision as to whether or not it was morally correct for America to be there at the time. He has an opinion. He just hasn't shared it. And he wants that to be separate from the game itself. But it's real hard to do that, bud, as he is very much discovering.
Yeah, the thing is, though, is you don't make a game like this, especially involving real people and their likenesses, without upsetting or pissing someone off. You know what I'm saying? Like, or doing something that's going to upset somebody. You know, I mean, the only way, like, back to my earlier point about making this into like a situation where it's just an experience where you're experiencing what these people actually went through. You know, you're making it like as close to a 1-to-1 experience of what they went through. Like, how do you do that from an interactive standpoint? Like, are you going to give the player the choice to kill civilians, or are you going to make them kill civilians? Because that's what happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, civilians died, you know? So like, are you going to tell the player like, hey, you know, I mean, a lot of it is like, you know, they shot some explosives and they got, you know, caught in the crossfire. Or would it be like a Spec-Ops line situation where you think you're killing insurgents, but you're actually killing civilians? You know what I'm saying? And there's just so many logistical problems here that it's like, you would have been so much better off just making a game that wasn't set somewhere realistic, you know, something that actually happened. You know, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you that probably if this were more fictional, like if this was like 6 days in someplace that's not real, like Kazakhstan, I don't know. No, I'm sorry.
I mean, like, you could have even still called it Fallujah. But you could have just not used different people and put them in, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, you're still going to upset people that way, but using their actual real likenesses and trying to recount the events as one-to-one as possible, but also making it a game is not going to be good.
I mean, because I'm thinking of like Spec-Ops The Line, which is something that we brought up here, right? That it is very fictional, right? Like Spec-Ops The Line isn't based on a true story. And in fact, toward the end, it gets very like superliminal and subliminal and shit, right? Like it gets all weird and...
Wait, Daily raised his hand. I don't know what Spec-Ops The Line is, and maybe some listeners don't.
Spec-Ops The Line is a video game. Anyway, no, it's...
Thanks.
Yeah, it's a third-person shooter. Like as a game, it's fun. Like, you know, it's your typical cover-based shooter. You've probably played some games like that before if you play a lot of shooty-pooty games. And if I remember right, you're on a mission. You're like a bunch of Marines, or is it Army? You're some soldiers.
Yeah.
From the U.S. military. You're sent to Dubai. Is that right?
It's something like that, and but it's like covered in they've had really bad sandstorms, and so like a lot of the city is covered up. But you're there to take out a certain like terrorist group or whatever.
Well, no, I think you're sent there because your commanding officer like defected or something like that.
Oh, maybe that's right.
And you're sent to take him out. And then there's a moment where you see like overhead via a drone or something. You see like, oh my God, there are so many like evil terrorists around that corner, right? And up through this time, you've just been mowing down people. Like if they're brown and in a turban, you got to shoot them because that's it. And you know, it's typical. Like that's what they tell you in the military too, right? Like if you can identify them as an enemy, shoot first, right? And that's what the game does too. And in fact, most military games do that. If you identify the enemy, which sometimes it's red text over their head, other times it's a turban, who's to say, right? You shoot them first. And then you see overhead, okay, there's a lot of dudes on the other side. Should I use white phosphorus on them? And then you do. Like the game doesn't give you a choice. It pretends like it does, but it gives you a choice. So you use the white phosphorus on them, and then you walk through the aftermath, and they were all civilians. Not a single one of them had a gun. None of them were out to kill you. So the game made you kill civilians, which I think is commentary on just like the military forcing you. Like you don't ask questions about your orders, you just do them.
Yeah.
And then after that point, the entire game tries to make you feel like shit. Like even the loading screens are like, do you feel like a hero yet?
Wow.
Yeah.
Just salt in the wound. Dang.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And then later in the game, it takes a stiff turn where you actually start killing American soldiers, and they're like yelling English to each other, and like you're just straight up killing Americans. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, that's what it feels like to be fucking cannon fodder in every piece of pop culture media. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm immediately going to go play this game. Clearly, it sounds like a fun time. Yay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but see, so like that's fictional, right? Like none of that really happened like to a T. But the things it's illustrating, you can see them, take them into your gamer brain, and then think a little bit about like the real world around you and then how that media affected you, and then maybe draw some connections, which some people might call that reading the politics from a source material, or, you know, just fucking understanding your world.
Critical thinking in my gamer brain? I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we've illustrated this fictional take on war, Daly, I'm curious for you, since you know you weren't familiar with Spec-Ops until recently. Would you have rather 6 Days in Fallujah be fictional like Spec-Ops The Line was, or are you down for this real gritty, real life, real situations really happened shit?
No, I'm not ready, because there's always going to be a moment where you don't do justice to something. You don't make it as brutal as it was, or you make it way more brutal than it really was. And that's also offensive and spitting on memories and graves, etc. I'd rather something than I sit down and be like, whoa, wouldn't that suck if that happened, versus sitting down in my leisure time and being like, whoa, that happened and that sucks. And because no matter what happens here with the game itself, whatever narrative it puts forth, that's going to become a widely believed pop culture narrative, because it is saying that this is to a T what happened, and if it gets it wrong, that's going to become the truth, quote unquote. The quote, what's that quote? Winners write the history, etc., etc.
Winners
history
do
books. History. Winners do history. They take history classes. No, the victors write the history books, and that's one of these. That's the exact situation that we're dealing with here. It's just it's a big burden, and I don't know if Tomty's up to it.
Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, we haven't really seen the actual game and how it plays so far yet, and there's still some time before it comes out, and if he decides to put this thing out, the controversy lies in the fact that he's talking about what it's gonna be, you know what I'm saying, or at least supposedly, right? Like, this is what his idea of what it should be like, and there should be no politics involved, and blah blah blah. But I don't know, like it's just really weird. You take something so realistic and you're just gonna gamify the hell out of it, because I mean, in preparation for the show, there's raw footage of what the hell happened in Fallujah, like on YouTube. You can watch.
No
it.
thanks.
And yeah, and there's like helmet cam footage and shit. And it's like it's disheartening. I mean, you sit there and watch it, and it's just like, yeah, these are a bunch of young dudes breaching and clearing like houses throughout this fucking city and looking for people to shoot. And then they're on the roof, and they're shooting RPGs and explosives indiscriminately at these buildings. And it's like, man, that sounds like a fun game, guys. Like, they're going through closets, they're going inside of rooms looking for people to shoot. Like, and some of them got shot and killed. Like,
right.
Man, that sounds like a blast, doesn't it?
To play devil's advocate, what you just described just sounds like every other. And obviously, I'm not a big fan of the genre myself, so correct me if I'm being totally ignorant about this, but it sounds like a lot of the gameplay that one would find in your run-of-the-mill Call of Duty game, going into rooms looking for people to shoot, shooting some RPGs at buildings.
Yeah. That makes me think a little bit about, let's talk about game design for a minute here, right? Call of Duty, obviously they're fictional games, set, some of them historical fiction, some of them just like fiction, but they tend to be rooted in some semblance of reality, right? Like, they do talk to real soldiers to tell their stories. They do work with real guns, weapons, arms experts to make sure that reload looks right, and the gun sounds real.
I have a fun fact. I recently learned that game companies have to pay licensing fees to weapons manufacturers in order to portray and have their specific weapons in the game.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
So yeah, with Call of Duty, right? Like, yeah, it's a lot of realism, but it's not like the real Battle of Fallujah depicted in Call of Duty, right? And then from a game design perspective, I mean, Call of Duty is fun, right? Like, because there's that thin veneer of this isn't real, you can get lost in the fun of like, yeah, I'm shooting the bad guys, or like you're playing online and like there's that rush of when you get like a 5-person kill streak and you get to call
no scope.
Yeah, you can like call in a predator missile. Like that's fun. That's like the good happy juice being released in my brain. I don't have to think about how predator missiles in real life are kind of terrifying and could murder like a lot of people. And
are also the interface is done through an Xbox controller.
Yeah.
Facts.
I didn't know that.
I learned some stuff today, guys.
So yeah, with that thin veneer of this isn't real, right? Like, Call of Duty is fun and it feels gamified, right? Like, the concept of shooting virtual bodies with guns is fun, right? So when you apply that to something, to a subject matter that is real and that by all intents and purposes isn't fun, does it make sense to have the game design philosophy be something that is inherently trying to be fun?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I just don't know. We haven't seen how they're going to approach this yet. We just know what the dudes talked about. And so far, just the general philosophy going into it does not sound great at all. To the idea of just like, oh, you know, it's all going to be about tactical stuff. And yeah. I mean,
he could stick the landing narratively. He could, you know, maybe he's just kind of an obtuse person in interviews, but perhaps this is actually going to be a really beautiful thing. I mean, but I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'd really like to hope so, right? Like, I know we've been pretty down on this game, but if this turns out to be like a really well done depiction of war and depicts both sides fairly instead of like demonizing the Iraqis or whatever, I like that'd be cool.
Yeah.
I'm just super not confident right now in that.
I think what we should really watch for too is that, you know, Tom T said that about, you know, 90% is going to be from the perspective of US Marines, but then there's going to be that extra 10% where it is an Iraqi father trying to get his family out of the city. And I think that part's going to either be super controversial or maybe super beautiful, or maybe like, I'm very interested in seeing how that 10% of the perspective is portrayed.
Yeah. I don't know if beautiful is the word I'd use, but
beautifully like tragic. I mean, it's definitely going to be tragic. Yeah. It definitely, like, the whole situation sucks, but you know.
Yeah, no, I understand the sentiment. I think I don't know. The dude could just be seriously putting his foot in his mouth, and then it comes out and it's actually what we're talking about. You know what I'm saying? But like right now he is. I don't know if this is just a bit of marketing or what, and he's just trying to like wave through and get his game sold. You know what I'm saying? Like it could be a whole host of things. It just doesn't look good based on what he's telling us right now. Yeah.
A question I want to pose to you two, because I'm sure that this is probably something that is going to come up with the more conservative, right-leaning gamers out there, the gamers who specifically don't like politics in their Fallout games and their Metal Gear Solid games, like those kind of gamers. All of this outrage right now, is this just a bunch of baby leftists virtue signaling? Like, why can't we just enjoy a fun, realistic shooter based on a real situation? Why can't we just have fun, guys? Why can't this just be fun?
People died.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like history itself. Like, it's fun to be like, you know, before there was D&D, we talked about, you know, there were war games about like the Napoleonic Wars, and we can, because there's so much separation of time between now and then that it seems like a fantasy, we can, you know, wash away that blood because it's old and not there anymore. But this was 2004. I was alive then. I could write and read and know that things are bad by then. Not a lot of time has passed to take away the horror of it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know what to feel about it. I really just have to see it come out and see what the reaction is. But I think that if this doesn't sound like it's appealing to you, or you're afraid of a game having a message or being political, or play a different fucking game then. Yeah. Like, this game isn't for you. There can be, you know, games can coexist. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to like every fucking game that comes out. And if it's controversial or has themes you don't like, then don't fucking play it. Like, I don't know. But saying games that they don't have a theme or like any sort of political message, or I don't like games that are political, it's like, okay, fine. There's plenty of, go play fucking Mario. That's not very political.
Well, actually, there's a lot of talk about, you know, is Peach a despot because she's a monarch of the Mushroom Kingdom and that all the resources go to her?
And there is the
Yeah.
discussion about whether plumbers have too much power in that world, which
Plumbers have a lot of power in that world.
Yeah,
Is it
there's
due
a
to
plum-
unionizing?
Is there a plumbers union? Yeah, is there a plumbers union in the Mushroom Kingdom?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, so, but I will say too, though, on the flip side of things, that a lot of people do play games that don't necessarily care for politics in games, but they play games that are inherently political, and some of those people just don't like to be preached at. You know what I'm saying? So you can have a game that is political or has themes that are political without being directly preachy. You know, like bold-faced, like smack you in the face, clear as day, like political message. You know? And that I kind of understand. You know what I'm saying? Like, if a game is just like, okay, like, I'm not stupid, I get it, like, I know what you're trying to say, then that is like on the merit of the game. But if you're like actively saying like, hey, no politics in games whatsoever, then it's like you're gonna be that makes for a pretty short list of stories there, dude.
Yeah. And I guess the reason I'm always going to have a pitchfork against the no politics in my games crowd is that it falls into the same problem that a lot of like alt-right groups tend to. We're you know, at first, we're just making jokes about how Jews suck. Like, we're not serious. We're not really anti-Semites. And when everything feels like a joke, you can apply that mood to anything to eventually justify actually anti-Semitic actions, until you can take off the mask and be like, actually, I was an anti-Semite this whole time.
All the time.
This is a similar thing in the gaming space, where you can say, oh, I don't want politics in my games. Like, I don't want to have to think about whether America should have been in Iraq. I just want to play a US soldier and shoot people in an online game. And that's fine. But that same group of people also say, I don't want to see a bisexual protagonist. I don't want to see a gay,
that's
queer,
political.
trans protagonist. Yeah, that's political. I don't want to think about that, which that's cool, I guess. Or maybe you can like accept your fellow humans more. I don't know. Like, that shouldn't be political. And the fact that that falls under the same banner allows this opinion to justify eventual hatred of people, or even something as simple and what I argue should be incontroversial, a woman as a protagonist.
Whoa.
Who boy?
Yeah.
Now you had to go get all political on me. It has to be some kind of SJW snowflake statement.
Exactly. And that philosophy is something that I really worry about. And I think that this game, based on a real fight where real people died and it happened in living memory, the fact that these people are pushing that this game is also not going to be political is a bigger step in that direction of saying not political is a shield for all kinds of shit.
Yeah.
I mean, if I
Exactly.
recall, and this can be, please correct me if I'm wrong, if I recall right, when Steam was the first controversy with like what game, like what sexual content is like bad sexual content are you not allowed to have on Steam, when there was like the rape simulator thing, and it's like, well, you're making it's just a game, you're making it into a statement, you're making it into a political statement, it's not political, so it shouldn't be taken so seriously. Yeah, I think that shows how the slope can get pretty slippery here, as far as just using that as an excuse to not acknowledge the morality of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that saying that like there shouldn't be politics in games or whatever is just infringing on a lot of creative vision. And they're you know what I'm saying? So when it comes to creative vision in games that can be made, like, I usually always fall back on like, hey, like, if this is what the developer intends, whatever that may be, they should be allowed to see their creative vision through. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then to go out of the way and to approach a subject matter like this and to say it's not political is just like flying in the face of because that's, at that point, that's not your creative vision. You know what I'm saying? That is cold, hard history and facts. Yeah. That is something that happened that involved real people. You know what I'm saying? So that's where I reel back that argument. You know, that's you have to do that justice or don't do it at all. In my opinion.
It's a lot like when I forget their names because they are being slowly and wonderfully forgotten from history. The pair of Game of Thrones showrunners, when they were like, we're going to make an alternate history of this when the South won the war and there's still slavery, but it's not going to be like a political thing or anything. It's going to be based on real events. It's an alternate history of America, but it's not, about America or, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just such a dumb justification for some things, like just own it.
Own it.
Yeah.
Own it.
Like being political shouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, because it just comes across as pandering. It's pandering.
To the apolitical gamers. It's trying not to make a statement while also making a statement that you're pandering.
You want to try to be liked by any and every once your game sells.
Right.
Yeah.
I do want to leave you two with some food for thought too, and to our readers as well.
Delicious.
So Tomty has said that the U.S. government is not funding 6 Days in Fallujah. Right. He has gone on record stating that. Do keep in mind the U.S. government has funded many movies in Hollywood, including Karate Kid 2 and Iron Man 1 and 2. And of course, many more. Top Gun. Even,
a lot of Transformers movies.
Yeah, they have. That blew my mind. So I'm not saying like the U.S. government is secretly funding this game. Who's to say? But Tomty has received previous U.S. government funding for like other games / like military training simulator type of things.
Yeah.
So he has experience making pro U.S. government military shooters. And he is not directly involved in creating this game. He is the founder of the publisher, but Highwire Games is developing it, right? However, he was around in 2009 when the original game was announced. He was the one spearheading that original game and the one talking about how, we talked to like 70 military people and civilians. Like this has been his pet project for over a decade now. So
he's a little attached.
Yeah, and when you combine that with the fact that he has worked with the US government previously to make military training programs, it's that in and of itself is tough to say, hey, maybe this is a little bit political. Like you got involved with a literal political body.
Yeah. His when that information is freely available, people are going to make assumptions about your opinions. So then when you state that you don't have the opinion or you're not going to acknowledge something or other people are going to fill that in for you.
Yeah. I mean, really what it boils down to is that I'm going to wait for this game to come out and see if all of what he's talking about, like see how it all turns out. This game, I mean, the fact of the matter is, though, from a game dev standpoint, is this is not a big budget game. This is an A level game, and it's probably not going to be like the most cutting edge graphics, right? It's a presumably pretty small team, Robert.
Highwire Games on their website only has 3 people listed, but I've seen pictures of like the bigger staff, and there are more people there. But it includes some former Halo people, Destiny people. Like Marty O'Donnell is the sound designer, the guy who made the that whole thing. Yeah,
iconic.
Interesting. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know what this game will look like in terms of quality, in terms of just being a game. So I don't know. Who's to say? This is either going to be a big mess when this comes out, or it's going to get praised for being an artful retelling of a really shitty time in a war that shouldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
We're watching you, Tomty.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to be pleasantly surprised by this game. It just threw a lot of red flags up,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, I think I've kind of stumbled and stammered throughout this episode because I just don't know how to properly. I don't know. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. I don't really know how to feel about it, like how to tackle it, in my head. It just more so the messaging just rubs me the wrong way. So.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you take no politics to a literal extreme, because I think this is perhaps one of the biggest challenges to that. I don't think we've explicitly said this yet on the show, but I think it's a good final message for it. War is inherently political. Just period, full stop. Like, war doesn't happen without politics, literally, at all.
Yep.
Like, unless it's for sport, unless you're just like, I want to hunt that other group of people for fun.
Yeah.
Don't think that's what happened here.
Nope.
Yeah, it's almost like war should be like an absolute last resort rather than, a reactionary thing.
Yeah. And even then, the justification of I just want to hunt that group for fun, that's also an implication that other group is subhuman, which is a political statement in and of itself, really. So
it's almost like we just don't exist in a vacuum, and that games don't exist in a vacuum.
Wait, your vacuum can play games?
Yes, I use my vacuum to play Wii Sports. I bet I could.
My vacuum,
TBH.
I'm just saying you could probably get your vacuum to run Doom.
You could run it on a Doomba.
So that's been the episode, y'all. Let's end on that note.
Yeah, on a Doomba. No, I'm gonna name my Roomba that now.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so that's been this dark episode of Everything in Pod. I hope that you maybe learned something here, or maybe were challenged on some of your preconceived notions. And if you have thoughts that you want to share with us, I'd be very curious to hear what you think about this game, whether you support it, maybe somewhere in the middle, maybe you're against it. Who's to say? We'd love to know. You can tweet at us. You can email us. Both of those links are down below. And if you email us, we might read out some of your thoughts. Like a while ago here, we got a message from Brandon in Baltimore regarding our D&D episode, which we actually mentioned today, which is pretty cool. Let's see. Just wanted to chip in with my thoughts on D&D and add on to something I think you touched on briefly. I think one of the biggest selling points of D&D is that it gives great opportunities for people who aren't necessarily creative, clever, extroverted, etc. to have those creative spotlight moments and do awesome things in a low-stress environment. Sure, you might not be able to come up with the wittiest thing every time, but the game gives you millions of opportunities, so you're bound to do something cool at some point. And if you can't or don't want to in a given situation, that's not a problem. You can just continue like normal and take normal actions. And if you're like me, someone who always comes up with a perfect response hours after the fact, I can relate. You can just put it in your pocket and use it when a similar situation inevitably arrives down the line. Improvisation is great, of course, but if you're not good at it, you can think about and plan quite a few things beforehand, and that's totally fine. Plus, it's all collaborative, so you don't have to carry the whole load yourself in making those fun moments happen. Thanks for those thoughts, Brandon. I think you really hit the nail on the head. Yeah, like that's what I've always said. D&D is improv for nerds, but it's all collaborative, right? And you could always pocket ideas, save it for later. That's what makes D&D so fun.
Mm-hmm. Low stress environment.
That is some love of the game right there. D&D really is a great thing, man. It really is.
Same here, and I hope we can apply some of these ideas like improv and pocketing information for 6 Days in Fallujah, and that comes out this year, because that's right, it's supposed to come out in 2021, year of our Lord, Anno Domini. So we'll see.
I'm anxiously awaiting the hands-on previews from various news outlets.
Oh yeah. And if you haven't seen it, Hard Times also posted this wonderful story. The headline's so good.
It's so good.
What was it, like devs of
shooting
game
JFK in the fucking head.
Shoot JFK in the fucking head claim that their game is not political. And it's like, God, it's so good. Yeah, go check that out. It's hilarious. But this has been an episode of Everything in Poderation. We will be back next week, so stick around, keep your eyes on the prize, and subscribe to our feeds if you haven't already. We'll see you next week.
Wait, we're not done yet. BioShock Infinite, guys. That game's not political.
Cut him off. Cut the mics.
You're right.
Cut the
It's not
mics.
political.
It's not political.